Morning. I'd like to call today's special meeting of Los Altos School District Board of Trustees to order. A recording and or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. If technical difficulties occur or persist, the meeting will continue without broadcasting. I will now call the roll. Brian?
Present.
Stella? Here. Jim?
Here.
Brandon?
Present.
And I, Shelley Serkey, am here as well. We have a quorum. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Would any board members like to provide comment on today's agenda? No? All right. In that case, we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Stella. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Motion to approve today's agenda as presented was made by Stella, seconded by Jim. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. On to the first or only item today, our study session on the facilities master.
Right, so process-wise, well, I think we'll have Eric do the presentation and then we'll pause for community comments because it looks like we have some public comment. And then you guys can begin discussion.
If anyone else would like to submit a public comment card, please do so before public comment begins.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Yeah, we want to give you an update. Last time we met was at the end of March, and there was some discussion among board members about some things that you'd like us to bring back. And so we're here today to hopefully answer some of those questions, give some more updates and kind of discuss the program and some of our thoughts. We've also got some more cost in to kind of look at what is feasible for like a phase 2, and we'll go over that in a little bit. Today's agenda is to kind of review a draft project list. This is not the final list. I want to always emphasize the word draft. And also talk about cash flow anytime. It's not really effective to do the project list out 8 years and give you the exact cost, or even do the cash flow, because things will change and fluctuate. If you look at your checking account at your house, it changes every day, right? We also want to talk a little bit about the middle school model and kind of where we're at with that, and in relation to the Measure E bond program. Then we'll talk a little bit much more in depth on phase 1 and 2 of the project and kind of the scope, and then some next steps, and then action that we'll be asking the board to do. This is not an action item today, it's a discussion only. And then staff will ask for some direction from the board of anything you want us to bring back for either the May 18th meeting, which would be a short turnaround, but then also really for June 1st and June 8th. So Measure E was passed by the public in 2024. It was a $350 million general obligation bond, and it was to modernize our schools, upgrade them, do the biggest component is for the San Antonio campus to help us solve the overcrowding at Egan and Bullis, or Egan and Block. So, we wanted to highlight this and always remind people that this was a measure that was supported by our public and our voters, and it's going to be great to start working on getting our schools upgraded and modernized. This is a sample project list and draft of where we're at just for phase 1 and 2, I don't want to pause right here. I want to go kind of through the slides, and then we can come back to this. This is also the cash flow. So when you're just like our general fund, we have to have enough cash in the bank to pay our ongoing expenses. Well, a bond program is no different. If you look at the beginning and really kind of like the top, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but this is a sample of how much your beginning balance is at the beginning of the bond program, and then how much money we're expected to spend that month. And then we'll have to issue another Series B of bonds, probably in January, early March of 28, to have enough cash to finish the San Antonio campus, but then also give us seed money, construction money for future projects and at our school sites. And the middle school model, we've had a couple discussions, February 9th and March 26th, to talk about some what we would do at Block in Egan. And I think there was good direction of saying, hey, that the remaining students from Bullis will be placed at Egan, and then the rest of the students will be placed at the San Antonio campus. So we've been working with our architect team, looking at the number of portables we would need to implement middle school model. The good news is we have some classrooms and some capacity to move our students to the middle schools with not a lot of big outlay for the district. And we talk about, I think we use kind of like the village concept, right? Where the sixth graders will still be part of the general campuses at Block and Egan, but they'll also have like a little area for their core classrooms, which is good for them as they're as they're starting getting into middle school. So it's a nice transition for those students. We want to finalize the middle school model and kind of what we're going to do. Hopefully by June, we can get an architect and have some decisions made. And the reason is, if we're going to do any type of moving students and getting them, the sixth graders, to the middle schools in that summer of 2028, at the same time the San Antonio campus is opening up, we wanted to have the architect involved, needs to be entailed, because there are some portables that will be removed from both campuses. And we will need to decide where's the best location? Is it this row? Is it this area on the campus at Block and Egan? So there is a lot of work ahead of time. If we're not going to be doing a lot of moving things around, then DSA is going to be pretty easy to work with for middle school. As far as if we're just removing portables, there might be some concrete or asphalt restoration and removing some of the utilities that are being fed to them. But other than that, it's not going to be super invasive to the campus. So when you look at like our budget right now, we're using a very kind of a general budget of not needing a ton of concrete, just moving portables. There is a cost to remove a portable, which is disconnecting all the utilities, and then you have to have mobile modular if they're at least portable, pick them up and take them away. So we're budgeting very low because we don't have all the information at this time. We did do a contract with ATIS, and they're kind of looking, and then our timeline is still for summer. So any work that happens is going to happen right when school gets out. We'll get those rooms or whatever we need to do, and we'll make sure the classrooms are ready. They'll have furniture in there. They'll be ready to go for sixth graders to attend in the fall of 28. Some of the things we wanted to kind of highlight is what are these, and I shared this at the last meeting in March, but the site-specific modernization components. Our classrooms, most classrooms, when you do modernization, you're going to modernize the fire alarms and upgrade those. I think in this room, do we have one? Yes. So that pull station back there, that is not an automated system. So if there's a fire at night, somebody would have to be here to pull it to let people know, but nobody's around. Fully automated fire alarms are what the DSA requires. That would be smoke detectors, heat detectors, duct detectors in the HVAC. Modernizing, getting our schools upgraded, it has to happen. So that'll be what kind of scope of fire alarms. A lot of our fire alarm systems in our schools are a bit antiquated and not in great condition. We do have false alarms periodically, and which are annoyance to students and staff. So we want to minimize that, but also get fully automated systems. HVAC, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems they usually last 15 to 20 years, just like at your house. It's about the same thing for commercials and schools. All of our units are past their useful life. They're failing. Compressors are failing. There's also a different refrigerant that is used for the compressors for the cooling. And that refrigerant is like not used in California anymore. So you have to replace the whole unit as units go down. So we are seeing more units fail. The compressor is failing. Hard to find parts and things from units that are 20 plus years old. So that is a significant impediment to our maintenance department, because it's hard. Instead of replacing the unit, we were trying to, fix some of these things. It's not really not that good use of our funds. Lighting in California, we're no longer allowed to have fluorescent tubes. So all these lights that have the fluorescent tubes are not allowed. So as these light fixtures fail and the tubes go and the ballasts go, very hard to find tubes and replacement parts. They have to be LED now. So that's a significant cost. We have done a couple classrooms with LED lighting, a little bit at Springer, Block, and Almond, but most of our schools have the old lighting systems that need to be replaced. ADA path of travel. Several years ago, we did a shade structure project at Gardner Bullis, and the Division of State Architect, who oversees all school construction, made us upgrade the path of travel, and that is from the parking lot all the way to where the new construction is. So that means the concrete has to be no more than 2% cross slope. Well, 2% cross slope is like almost flat. And so that's so if you're a disabled in a wheelchair, that the slope is so at an angle, and that's what that cross slope is. So they want the wheelchairs to have a more natural flat path of travel. That becomes very expensive, but it's much needed to upgrade our schools. Restrooms also have ADA requirements. There's a turning radius, the stalls. There's a lot of the height of the sinks, the height of the mirrors. Everything has to be ADA accessible. They need to be upgraded, and our restrooms definitely need that. Not really required, but some of our schools, sometimes it's hard to find the main office, not all of them. So looking at the front of the school, the wayfinding, general classrooms, making sure the classrooms inside have paint and carpet and are upgraded. Additional shade during the facility master planning process. There's a lot of discussion about shade in the schools, and the parents and community really wanted extra shade. We do have some pop-up tents and that are periodic for kids to eat lunches, but those need to be upgraded as we do modernization. Classroom AV and emergency communication bells and the communication evacuation communication devices. We are trying to go to more TVs and these smart TVs that can have Apple TV, and really teachers can project using that. And it's much better than these old antiquated projectors. That was the most modern technology back in the time, but TVs is a much more modern thing. But our classrooms also need to be upgraded as far as Cat 6. It used to be Cat 5, now it's called Cat 6. And so we're working with Bao and our tech team to make sure our classrooms are modernized, that we've got updated Wi-Fi, the wireless access points, and there's one right there above us. The alarms and security systems, we do have alarms at some of our schools and in certain buildings, and that needs to be upgraded. It's old systems. The analog phone lines are failing. So these are things, as we're looking at what is modernized in the classroom, it's a lot of things, and it's not just one little thing. Our roofs, some of our roofs are in decent shape, but most of them are not so. Just like your roof at your home, it lasts 20 years, 25 if you're lucky. Some of our schools, the composition shingles are very thin. It looks like a piece of paper. And then when the wind blows, the shingles lift up, and then the underlayment will tear, and then we get a roof leak. So it's very common. If you look at some of our roofs, you'll see a nice patch of like new shingles around some old shingles because of things like that. So our roofs, when you do roofing, the longer warranty you get, the more it costs, but you won't have to re-roof for 25, 30 years. And so that's the idea, is getting a more robust roofing material that's going to last longer and avoid those roofing leaks. You don't want water leaks because water intrusion causes damage to the paint, to the walls. It's just not a great place to be. One of the things in our master planning process was windows, and that's what glazing is called. And glazing is very expensive to replace some of these steel frames with aluminum frames and the double pane windows. It's very expensive. So we removed that out of the master plan for value engineering. It was just going to be too expensive. You can put that back in, but then there's a trade-off of doing that, right? And so we felt we could get more value, but it is good to have windows. They're better, that they're more efficient. There's also tinting and things you put on the windows to keep the sun out, to keep it cooler in the room. So these are all things that when we look at modernizing school, these are all kind of the components when we talk about painting, roofing, painting, and HVAC. So I took a couple pictures from some different campuses. Yeah, it's really hard to see on the picture, but the one on the left, that's the multi-purpose room in Almond. And as you walk up in Almond, you say, oh, it looks okay. It needs a little paint. But if you look really close, it needs a lot of paint. The fascia, which is the trim boards on the outside that outline, and there's a piece of metal flashing. You can see the roof and the flashing and the fascia board are starting to almost like disintegrate, where it's in poor condition. And that's where now that fascia board if we don't get paint on it and sand it and get it primed, it's going to rot. And so we were seeing that at multiple schools, multiple campuses, that we need to start making sure we're painting our campuses. It's not just that so it looks nice, it's also to protect the asset, right? And when you paint your house, it's the same thing. You want to paint to protect the wood. I always have a good laugh at that movie, Something About Mary. And the old lady was always sunning herself, and she was very like leathery and wrinkled, but she was nice and tan, right? But the sun is very damaging to our buildings. You look at some of our campuses, the wood is damaged from sun. The doors need to be repainted from the sun. The asphalt, when that sun hits the asphalt, it's not good for the asphalt, right? So when you think of the buildings, it's also not good for your roofs, right? So the UV rays from the sun are very damaging to our buildings. And so you have to do really good preventive maintenance to protect them. And we just haven't had the dollars to do that. So the idea was, as we're modernizing our schools, we want to refresh the paint, make sure that the school buildings are protected, and then also do the roofs and also. So that, and then you can see the very thin roofing materials. That's the picture. I believe the one in the upper right is from Gardner Bullis. I think those both are on the two right pictures. The roof is very thin. We had a couple roof leaks last winter. We have good roofing contractors to help us make these repairs. But when you start spending thousands of dollars of repairs, that comes from our maintenance department budget. And that's not great use of their budget to do big repairs. We've had to do this at Santa Rita, Gardner Bullis. Every school's had to do roofing repairs like this. The one on the bottom right is an HVAC unit at Gardner Bullis, and that's in a permanent classroom. But that is what is called a mini split system. Those HVAC units are smaller, they're older, they have old refrigerant, and as that unit dies, you can see it's up on the roof. It's like in a weird location. It's hard to service it. It doesn't allow for a lot of fresh outside air. And I remember during COVID, that was one of the things that we were talking about, MERV8 filters and all the things that we need to do in our schools, but getting fresh outside air. Our HVAC systems, when we talk about upgrading, is upgrading the systems to allow for a fresh outside air. It's more efficient. It's also good for student learning. All students want to be in these well-lit classrooms that have good lighting, good fresh air. And I always say, the Los Altos School District is one of the best school districts in the state, but we need to have the best facilities too, right, to keep that learning going. So I always tell our people is we have world-class teaching and learning going on. We need to have this upgrade our facilities at the same time. So these are just a couple snapshots of kind of what the roofing, painting, and HVAC. When I say modernizing, it's not just, it's also protecting the asset. Classroom lighting. This is a good example of the fluorescent tubes. I think this was at Allman in Lisa Schubert's room, one of our TK teachers. And the lighting was failing. You can't find the ballast to, the ballast is used to electronically start the fluorescent tubes. And the ballast was failing, the tubes were failing. And what we had to do was kind of like a Band-Aid. We basically removed the ballast and we put in new LED tubes. And then we had to bypass the ballast and wire. And so we had tons of electrical time and labor to just fix a couple lights that were failing. And these lights are very common throughout our district. These drop down trough lights, as sometimes they're referred to. And they were great at the time, but they are also 25 years old. And if you look at I do use a lot of examples of your house. When you look around your house and you walk around, you see things that are really old, go, God, we should replace that. And that's the same thing with the classroom, right? So at the time, these were state of the art, but they're failing, they're outdated, and the fluorescent tubes can't be found in California. So we have to do a lot of retrofits and band-aiding until we have time to actually do the replacements. And if you talk to teachers, they will say, yeah, my lights and HVAC, that's the number one, that's the top two things that we hear from staff members that are in classrooms with kids, lights and HVAC mostly. This is an example of us actually, we did a full light replacement, and this was at Block School, and I can't remember what room this was in, but over at Block a couple summers ago, we actually had a contractor, and we did not do every classroom. We didn't budget for that, but we did the worst classrooms that had the worst lights. So at Block, Springer, and Almond, we went through, and these are upgraded LED lights. They have motion sensors, so when you're not in the room, the lights will shut off, right? So this is like modernized lighting, but the HVAC is still not done. The roof isn't done. So we have done a little bit of work over the last couple of years as things have failed, and we can't wait much longer. But this is a good example of like a room that we actually did do. And you walk in those rooms and the teachers go, "Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I can teach in a great environment." And that's just for the lights. So you can imagine getting the lights in a classroom. It's a big deal to some of our staff members. Gardner Bullis classrooms. Gardner Bullis, and I included this slide in a site map to kind of talk about it, is when the school reopened, they installed 8 classrooms, all portables. We own 3 of them. And then there's also like a bathroom building and like a little custodial storage at that. So, and those are all leased. And they've been in there almost, I think it's almost been 20 years. It's been quite a long time. So that we're leasing those. So almost half of their campus is in portables, and that's not a great place for learning. We do have portables all of our campuses in some form or fashion, but some of them are flex rooms for art and breakout rooms for music and things like that, but not permanent rooms all day long. These are permanent classrooms that people are using, or not permanent classrooms, but portable classrooms that are being used by teachers year round. They're not great. The kids, when they hang their backpacks outside, they get wet from the rain, right? Because most classrooms have a long overhang. These are not like that, so they do get wet. That's just a kid issue, but it does impact the kids. You can see these ramps are not the greatest to get in and out of the rooms. On the back side of these portables are those units, and that's called a BARD unit. And that's the name of the unit that they attach to a portable. This room's in a portable. And these units are loud, they're not efficient, they're old refrigerants, and you can see, and you've got these loud, noisy HVAC units facing permanent classrooms right next to it across the walkway. So this is kind of like a good look of what it looks like to be in these portable classrooms at Gardner Bullis. This map, and if I can be super fancy with this pointer. No.
Had it there for a minute.
There we go. These rooms right here is the area I'm talking about. There are 4 portables here. We own 3. I think we own these 2 and maybe this one, and then these ones are leased. And then there's a custodial storage building here and a boys and girls restrooms. Last summer, actually it was 2 summers ago, the floor was so rotted, and it's a rental, so Mobile Modular came out and replaced it. But the conditions are not great. Anytime you go into a portable building, it's just not as good as a regular building. We can all agree to that. So this is kind of what it looks like. We're leasing 5 classrooms, the restroom building, custodial storage. The staff room up front is also leased. The main office and staff room are all up front here. The flex room is like right here behind it. The student center building here and the library are leased. And the total cost of leasing all these buildings is $140,000 per year. We just got our upgraded costs. Just like when you get your bills from when you go out shopping, everything is more expensive. The portable rentals every year are also more expensive. So every year they have costs so that the leases do not go down per year. So that's a kind of a good little snapshot of where these portables are at on the campus. And then I wanted to kind of highlight what the master plan proposed was we would remove those portables. These would be brand new classrooms. Now, what would happen is grade 6 will be not at the campus anymore. We won't have to build those classrooms, but they're limited on space. This would be a music flex room. This would be a small lunch canopy for outdoor eating. This would be classrooms with the boys and girls restroom permanent, and like a little outdoor maybe seating area, little mini quad out in the front. So this is kind of what we're talking about. 6 new classrooms, bathroom building, music storage, and a little outdoor area. And then what we haven't figured it out yet. Once we get decisions, is you could pop a portable in during the summer, no problem. But this is permanent construction. It can be built pretty quick. The idea would be though, is that we'd have to do some sort of temporary housing for a period of time to house students and then get this construction done and built, and then the students would move back in. And that would be kind of our thought on how we would implement that plan. And then one of the things, this was a Timber Quest project. We went to Menlo Atherton, to Sacred Heart School. It's in Atherton, actually. And we went, gosh, it's been over 3 years now. And this is a project they did. It's a prefabricated building. It's mass timber. It's very popular. Hoover Elementary School in Palo Alto built an entire school using this prefabricated, and it's beautiful. I visited it. Sandra and I went over there one day. It's beautiful. The campus looks great. It doesn't look like they're not portable. Prefabricated is not portable. And I think there's always this misnomer that it's cheap. No, it's actually permanent construction. It's a 50+ year lifespan, just like any other new construction. So one of our thoughts would be it's very cost effective to have these buildings built. It comes in panelized systems. They get built off-site and then they put it together like an erector kit. It's actually amazing to watch. They crane in the roofs and the building materials. When we watched them do it at Palo Alto Unified up at Hoover School, it was really fascinating. You can see the high ceilings, the bright lights coming in, natural lighting. This is a kindergarten classroom here, and you can see there's their circle rug and all their little I love the little furniture, right? But you can see they've got casework for supplies and things. Really a nice, it's a really nice learning environment. More schools are going to these type of systems because it's a cost savings. You can build things off-site where it's cheaper, have them assembled on site, and it's a cost saving. And you're also saving not just on the materials, but on time, right? Because the less time you're on the site doing construction, you're saving dollars. Still have to pay for electrical and upgrades and getting the utilities there, but the actual building cost per square foot is less than new construction. So this is the Timber Quest of kind of the things we've looked at in the past, and then we'd be, asking to look at that into the future as well. So a couple options that we're thinking, based on some discussions at the last meeting, was one of the options is we could modernize Santa Rita and Oak, which we felt was a higher priority at the schools, and all schools are a priority, but we just felt the first phase would be Oak and Santa Rita, and then building those new classrooms at Gardner Bullis. Another option was to do classroom modernizations of Santa Rita, Oak, and then Almond or Springer, depending. When we look at the facilities, Almond and Springer are about the same as far as the condition of the HVAC and the lights. They all need work, so it's just deciding which one would go first. My thought we would do Almond probably first. And then future discussion is, are there any small quick start projects we can do in the summer of 27 and 28? Based on cash flow, it would not be multi-million-dollar projects, but could we paint a campus to protect the assets? Could we do a small roofing project or a small lighting project? We can do that, but we have to be mindful that we can't do these humongous projects that might trigger DSA and other things. So it might be a small project, but there are ideas. Can we do another smaller project between now and the summer 29 at the school sites? And we'd have to, talk about what that would look like. That's kind of like what we were thinking is like, what are some options for you? And then really, give you the opportunity to ask some questions and go from there. Some next steps, either at the next meeting on May 18th, or we would do it June 1st or June 8th, is that we would approve the final budget revision to Measure N. Measure N has some remaining dollars in it, and we would ask the board to allocate those dollars for the San Antonio campus. Then we would also ask the board to approve an initial Measure EE budget and project list. And a relative timeline, it will change. When we look at our multi-year projections in our general fund, that's all a bond program is a multi-year expenditure plan. But instead of doing it for staff and teachers, we're doing it for facilities, right? And that's really what a bond program is. It's just a multi-year expenditure plan for your facility upgrades. in order to stay on track and to be able to meet timelines for DSA and submittals and things, we would hope that we could get some architects. We might not get the architects hired by June 8th, but we want to have the board give staff direction to get the hiring process started. We could hire architects over the summer, and then when everybody comes back by August, we could have started getting the meetings going. And then if we are going to do a design build, which is what we're doing for the San Antonio campus, if we were choosing to do some new classrooms at any school, and if we were choosing to do that, you have to do a formal RFQ, request for qualifications, and a request for proposals for design build. Because if you have an architect and a builder is a design build entity, you have to do a process for that. And so that's kind of, we want to make, it has to be a formal process, just like what we did with the San Antonio campus. So those type of things are a lot of work that are ahead of us, really for the rest of the school year and then into the summer. None of this has to be done right away, but we do need to have, staff will need some direction in order to move forward with architects. And I think that was like kind of our last slide. And I'm very happy to open up to any questions you have and talk about what questions you might have on your mind.
So we'll do clarifying questions from the board, and then public comment, and then we'll go to board discussion. I know we have some new people who walked in, so if you want to submit a speaker card, now's your chance to do so before we open public comment. So clarifying questions from the board. Steph?
Eric, one thing that changed between our last study session and this one is that the phase 2 went from 2 schools to up to 3. So is that something that you determined that we'd have enough bond dollars left over?
Yeah.
To do the 3rd school?
Yep.
Okay. And then another question that came up last time was whether we might be able to use the portables at block to house the GB students, but I don't know if staff determined that'd be better to do temp housing at the GB site rather than at block.
Yeah, I think we haven't gotten into that much level of detail yet.
Okay.
I think if we start getting into the planning process, we'd have to decide that. Would we want to have half a Gardner Bliss in a portable somewhere else at the offsite? Back then they called it the camp school, I guess, back then.
Yeah.
It might be better to keep them all on the same campus, but that's a decision we can make. We don't have to make that today.
Okay, but that it's like to be determined.
Correct, yeah. And there will be a cost of moving cost and all that, but it might not be as expensive as it would be to move the portables. Yeah.
Any other clarifying questions?
Maybe just for the benefit of the audience as well, all of the projects on this list and also throughout the rest of the phases have been allocated to this bond measure. So it's not a question of whether these things are going to happen, it's just the order that they're going to happen. Is that right?
Yeah, and then we also are we're trying to budget conservatively, and we have some money built in for escalation and contingency. But again, depending on what the scope is, and we talk internally, like, maybe we can't afford to do every single thing on this list. But from my experience is, you want to get as much of the classroom modernized as possible. It might not need interior paint or interior carpet, but the HVAC and lights, are a priority. The roofing are priorities. The fire alarm are priorities. So I think every school in some form or fashion is going to have some modernization work done. All of our schools need it.
And maybe to answer your question differently, Brandon, from previous board discussion, this plan for Measure EE on $350 million included the construction of the San Antonio campus, conversion to middle school, and the modernization of all 9 campuses, and upgrades to Gardner Bliss with that portable area.
So that,
Right.
so
So
going,
that's still on the plan right now. That's what the budget.
so like going back a slide or two to the options. That right.
It's the order.
Going to option 2 doesn't mean, for example, that new classrooms at Gardner Bills won't happen. It just means that'll happen
Later.
at a later date.
Yeah. And then what I did is, on the last time we met, that's a great question. I moved Gardner Bullis up. So then money that we had allocated for construction escalation went away, right? Because if we're gonna move, instead of having like the Gardner Bullis new classrooms in phase 5 or 6, if we move it up to phase 2, we're gonna get it done sooner, so there won't be the escalation cost in the out years. But then I also have to be mindful, if we're gonna do new classrooms at Gardner Bullis, then we will probably have to do some upgrades of ADA, path of travel, fire alarm upgrades. We might need to do all of that at the same time we do this new classroom. It might be more cost effective. Because you don't want to have, one of my old districts, they had 2 fire alarm systems for the campus. And the one fire alarm system failed and they had to do what's called a fire watch. They had somebody stay on campus 20, like all during the day in case there's a fire. So because the fire, and they had to spend a lot of money to do an emergency fire alarm replacement. And DSA, the Division of State Architects, oversees fire life safety. So you have to do it according to their standards, and that becomes very expensive if you're doing an emergency. So it's better for us to, if we can do proper planning, it helps us save money. We don't have these unintended problems, right? So the more planning you do and the more thoughtful we are on what we get done, I think we can get more things done at all the campuses.
I have some other questions, but I think they're for discussion. This one might be too, but on the new classrooms at Gardner Bullis, you were talking about prefab. And I remember, but I need a reminder on the different ways that you can build classrooms. I know we can build them from scratch, we can prefab them, and aren't Folia buildings different than prefab or something, or?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we would specifically do prefab, and I'm guessing that's to some cost benefit.
Cost and
Wait, so
time.
Folia and Timber Quest are both prefab,
They
they're
are.
just different brands.
Oh, they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
different brand. So there's really kind of 3 constructions. One is called stick built.
Right, yeah.
Stick built means you just
Scratch.
build it brand new,
Yep.
you design it and you build it from scratch.
That's-
DSA has never seen that design. It's usually more expensive to do stick built. Prefab is, it's normal, regular construction. It's just they build parts of the building off-site where it's cheaper, more cost effective, than they bring them in panels. Sunnyvale Middle School just built a new Folia building. It looks beautiful. The Hoover School in Palo Alto built a Timber Quest. It's pretty common for schools to use these products. Same lifespan, same quality materials. It's just more efficient.
And they're
So-
DSA pre-qualified.
and a lot of them are DSA pre-checked, so the DSA approval process is much quicker. The other advantage is you're saving square footage cost per square foot to build, but then it's also time. And time is money because you pay for the superintendent and the construction team and everybody to be out there. So if you can cut your construction time down by 4 to 6 months, that's significant savings to the district. So, and then the last form of construction is portables. And they could be portables on concrete foundations, or they're portables on like a wood, like pressure treated wood. And that's really, so that's the like, or modular portables are very similar. Yeah.
Any other clarifying questions? Have one. You said glazing, the windows that was taken out of the master plan. I just wanted to ask, what kind of windows do our schools have now? What I mean is not what kind, but like not casement or double pane, but like, are they single pane? Are they insulated or storm windows?
Yeah,
It'll cost us money in like energy bills. We have
yeah,
that problem at our house.
yeah. Most of the windows, depending when they were modernized last, are single pane. They're safety glass, they're tempered glass and they're safety, but they're not the double pane, well insulated windows with the aluminum frames, right? Which are that's the new version of windows. But yeah, so some of our glazing is older, different depending on when the school was modernized last.
I feel like that would cost us money in energy bills.
It does.
The longer we keep this moving. Let's venturing into discussion.
Yeah.
Is it more cost efficient to do the modernizing upgrades by site than it is by category?
Yeah, and one of the reasons is when you have your general contractor out there and you have an inspector out there and all the other special inspections that are required by DSA, it's more efficient to have one person doing all the work at one time. You could piecemeal it, but then you'd be hiring people 2 or 3 times to come back out to do all that work. So it is more efficient, I think, to try to do as much of the work in one summer or one time period as you can.
So you don't have to keep going back to that school multiple times, right?
Yeah.
It's less disruptive, is that?
Yeah, it's also, you know, we really have short windows to do this work. If we're gonna try to accomplish modernization during the summer, it's so much, that's why the timeline is so important. We want to get everything dialed in and procured and ready to go. So when school is out June 3rd, we can come in, you know, remove everything, do all the demolition, and then put all the classrooms back, right, and have it ready by August. It's a very short window and it can be done. But so much of the planning has to be done well ahead of time, where you really need to have everything approved, ready to go a year in advance. That means DSA approval by June of 27, so we can, or June of 28, so then we can actually start the work in the summer of 29. Yeah.
And that's my last question, actually. The work that we're talking about, it's only going to be done in the summer, or are there parts of it that'll happen during the school?
Modernization, our goal is to try to get it done during the summer only. So there's no disruptive to classrooms and teachers and kids. All the work would be done when kids are off. There would be impact to our summer camps, but we would use other classrooms or portables for the summer camps because those are important to our community. If we do new construction though, that takes more than a summer. So if we did Gardner Bullis classrooms, we could start that project any time, but we would want to say, okay, if we want to have the classrooms ready by the summer of 29, then we would need to start a little bit earlier, right? And that means we might, so to answer Stella's question about using portables or moving students to another campus, possibly, we would need to have all that happen during the summer of 28. So then we can start maybe in the fall of 28 or whatever, in spring of 29, start the construction at whatever campus we do it at, Gardner Bullis, for example, and then we can open up that school depending on timing. Yeah, it's hard. You have to know well in advance the plan in order to execute it.
It still takes a full year to build those, to like install those prefab.
I don't think it'll take a full year, but
It won't take a full year to install them. They'll be built off-site. And then maybe we could, I don't know how long it takes to actually put them on site, but
yeah, it depends. There's gonna be a lot of the utilities and underground and infrastructure work that has to happen. So all that has to be happening. Assembling it and doing the finish work and finishing up won't take as long, but there's still gonna be a lot of time to get the building pad ready and all of that.
I'm gonna move us into public comment because I think we're venturing into discussion territory.
Sure.
We only have one person for public comment, Lena. Can we give Lena 3 minutes, please?
Yep.
Good morning, I'm Lena. I'm the parent of an LASD student. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today because I have concerns about the proposed San Antonio site plan and how Measure EE funds are being allocated. As you guys had already mentioned, voters approved this measure to modernize facilities across all of LASD. I'm just struck by how large the fund allocation is. Over a third of it is being allocated to this site. Which if it runs even more over budget, it's going to take money away from the other schools that really need modernization. I reviewed the LASD Citizens Advisory Committee on Finance report in June 2025 with the California Department of Education projecting a 22.4% decline in LASD enrollment in the next decade. So it's a little confusing to me that, with declining enrollment, this huge proportion of the funds are being allocated to a new site. And furthermore, I'm confused too, because BCS has formally and consistently objected to this relocation. They cite California Education Code 4764B that charter schools cannot be moved without their consent. That's the last I heard about this. So I see so much planning going on, and I appreciate time is money argument. And I see both sides. We need time to plan things to get DSA approvals. But at the same time, I also don't have I'm not confident that BCS is really on board either. So should we instead be spending the remaining calendar year, allocating money where we already know for certain modernization is needed? You know, you mentioned some other schools in future phases, like Almond, that eventually, you know, all the schools, you're gonna touch all the schools. So like, why not flip it around and modernize those first? And then once you have more of a sure collaboration from BCS, then, you know, do that kind of planning. I'm confused. Maybe I'm missing information, but from what I can gather from news articles and from what I'm hearing from the community and board meetings, this is my understanding. So I just wanted to you know, urge, my information is correct. I urge the board to process plan, reconsider the allocation and the order of planning, and really engage all the stakeholders. And, you know, bring transparency to the community, because it is really confusing. I'm hearing conflicting information and it doesn't make sense to me for why things are being presented in this order. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. As you know, the board is not permitted to comment on your comments. I highly recommend that you reach out to a board member and have a conversation with one of us. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And of course, our board is bound by an NDA with most charter schools, so there's a lot that we cannot say. But I recommend that you speak to one of us who can clarify some of the misinformation that you may be getting. Okay, thank you. All right, on to board discussion. So, I don't want to keep this like free form, so I don't want to make it super formal. So if you have something to say, just say it. Please keep this off.
So in this document where we've said new classrooms at Gardner, we would move those up. This is just for the new classrooms, right? So my concern is,
I did put some money in there for fire alarm and all that, so this budget
and
for
lunch canopy, because we know that's gonna be a problem.
there is money in there. We feel to do the new classrooms, fire alarm, and some ADA path of travel. Until we know the exact scope, we're gonna budget this, and we're hoping that this number of 17.9 will go down. Right now, based on today, not knowing
But-
all the things.
I know, but like, would that include, because in these modernization plans of other schools, we're putting in lunch canopies or shade canopies or whatever, and we know 100% that the lunch canopy has to be replaced at Gardner. So
Can I follow up? Because, so there would be other like, in a future phase, modernization of the other Gardner goals.
Correct.
So wasn't clear to me why we would not just do all that work at the same time. Like, why would we pull the Gardner Bullis classrooms up to phase 2?
I don't know if we'll have enough cash to do all that. We'd have to really analyze it. For right now, we're trying to do.
Well, right, but so then why would we pull the classrooms up at all? Like, why wouldn't we, like, option 2 makes more sense to me if then it means that we're doing the new Gardner Bullis classrooms at the same time as we're doing the rest of the Gardner modernization. Like, that seems more cost effective.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, this is just a draft. I don't think it's the final decision, but we can say we're gonna do Gardner Bullis modernization, or it doesn't have to be Almer Springer, it could be whatever we think we can get done.
Yeah, so there is another phase, just to be more clear,
Correct.
there's another phase where we could, if you selected an option 2, a future phase could be inclusive of Gardner modernization and the classroom upgrades.
Sure.
well, but I mean, I think that's what Brian was asking, but I'm also saying, I mean, you know, Gardner wants new classrooms and they need new classrooms because their portables are in bad shape, but we don't want to create more problems, and we know that if we put classrooms there, we have to take that canopy down.
Correct.
And then we don't know when we're gonna put a new one up yet. So I'm just trying to make sense of why we would create problems. I mean, we're solving one problem by creating other problems, so.
Well, there was at least a canopy as part of the new construction plan.
That was, well,
There was an upper grade lunch canopy.
that's a small canopy, yeah.
Yeah,
But I wasn't sure if that was included in the cost of new classrooms.
it is.
Okay,
That whole quad area.
for that little space, but then the big canopy would go away.
During the work, for sure, similar to it before.
Like right here, this would be a lunch canopy for grades 4 or 5.
Right,
TK already eats on their own out
yeah,
there.
they.
So this, the 4 or 5 is eating here, then this canopy that's kind of like down this main area. Maybe it would be a smaller one, or we'd give them I mean, that would be a discussion item. What, you're gonna get 4 or 5 in here. We're also, and I always tell people, when 6th graders go off to middle school, there's gonna be less kids eating lunch at the elementaries.
Sure.
So the lunch canopies can maybe be a little bit smaller in
Sure.
scope, right?
But I mean. I don't mean to harp on that, but I mean,
Yeah.
it costs a lot of money to take it down and it costs way more money to put it up than we anticipated.
Sure.
So. Even if we took it down during construction and put it back up, like. That's gonna end up costing a ridiculous amount of money that we could be using somewhere else. Anyway, okay,
There is a current permanent canopy
no,
as well over there where your pointer is now, right?
Yeah,
Oh, at the
that's the
library?
one
Yeah.
yeah, that's a small shade sail that is behind the library student center area right back here. That one's DSA approved, that one's there. And then I think if we do this new classroom project, then they would build grade 4 or 5. It doesn't have to be 4 or 5. That's just a master plan.
Okay.
They could extend it out, make it bigger, it all depends on what we decide the scope will be.
okay,
Yeah, for master planning, I think they just said, hey, that's gonna be grades 4 or 5, and then, maybe they extend it out and, 2 or 3 each there together, whatever. Yeah,
So are we looking at? So I agree, here in our beautiful sunny California, lunch canopies are super important. But I'm kind of thinking about this project list in what has the greatest direct impact on student learning versus quality of life. And if I'm wrong in thinking of it this way, please tell me, because I'm happy to change my thinking. But I think of lunch canopies and things like that as more of a quality of life. And I think of classrooms, like putting permanent classrooms or modernization or fire alarms or the windows that are no longer, I feel like those kinds of things have a direct impact on student learning. And so in my head, when I'm looking at these project lists and thinking about what order we do it in, I'm prioritizing what has a direct impact on student learning, student achievement. Just a thought.
I have a question. So I know so far we really only looked at the cost of modernization at each of the campuses, but we did get some public comment at the last study session about TKK facilities. And let's say, for example, in phase 2, we wanted to I guess I'm wondering why we haven't kind of broadened the discussion to maybe consider doing the TKK classrooms at those sites rather than moving into a third school. And I'm not saying this is what I want, but I just, it's not even presented as an option. And so I was wondering if there was a reason for that we've ruled out doing it, maybe that's not an urgent need to upgrade the TKK classrooms because the facilities are adequate for our needs. I just was wondering if there was a specific reason that we didn't include that.
I guess I would say so right now we have all of our TK and kinder classrooms in permanent buildings. I'm going through my brain to make sure that that's an accurate statement, but I believe it is. And with the work of modernization, those bathrooms would be upgraded. All of those pieces would happen. The original facility master planning was around adding additional TK classrooms. I don't know that we need that.
Okay.
Frankly, I mean, we're now for next year 2 of full implementation. I think we will be at the exact same number of needed TK classrooms, so I don't know if, I think we had planned for two TK rooms at every school campus. I just don't know if we need them, and I would hate to build classrooms and they sit empty and or get filled with somebody's stuff, right? As happens as we vacate spaces on our campus. So I don't think it's a priority for us right now.
Okay, so and then just to make sure I understand this, so when we originally approved the facilities master plan, we did have TKK facilities as a priority, but that was under the assumption that we would need two TK classrooms at each campus, which hasn't, come to fruition, right?
Yeah, and the one thing is, the master plan is, these are the needs for the next 10+ years, and the needs will change. Who knew that we'd have universal meals, universal TK? Those are things that have changed over the last several years from the state of California. We know there's always more needs than you have dollars for. So then the idea would be prioritizing what is the biggest need. And I always say, I always have to remind myself as a former teacher, where did I spend the most of my time? In a classroom with kids. And so, I think we have many needs, new classrooms, new buildings, or there's so many things we can do. We just have to decide how much we can get done in this bond program. And knowing that, this is an investment in our facilities, and then we're going to keep doing those investments over many years. And you always want to be upgraded as much as you can, as much as you can afford.
All of our sites, since you mentioned the universal meals, do they all have like appropriate servers or whatnot?
It's a great question.
Depends
So-
how you want the appropriate. They're all appropriate.
Some of them are in a permanent building at the end of a building, like over at Springer. Almond has one as well. But then you've got like Oak in Santa Rita that are like serving out of a portable that we've kind of retrofitted and modernized. Block and Egan are set up like, somewhat of as a servery type thing. Every school is a little different. Loyola's more permanent. So every school has a different setup. But they're not big enough. We don't have full kitchens. We're an elementary district. Most elementary districts don't have full kitchens. So yeah, some of our rooms are in more permanent buildings and some of them are in portables.
But they're adequate for our needs, I would say right now.
Yeah.
Right? And
Within code compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, they've all been approved and we're serving kids.
yeah, I think it's fair to say that the staff recommendation is to focus on modernization of our
Okay.
schools.
Yeah.
And in a previous discussion, there was a question as to whether or not the permanent replacement buildings for Gardner Bullish should be moved up in the queue, which is why we brought that forward as an option for you. But I will tell you, and I see our maintenance team here in the back, like the need for modernization across our campuses is great.
Well, given Jim and Brian's comments, it seems like there's interest from some board members to combine the new classroom construction at GB with the modernization, and that makes sense to me as well. So I would be in favor of seeing that push back to phase 3 and then doing Almond in phase 2, because Eric, you said you thought Almond maybe had a little bit more urgent needs, right? So so that would be Santa Rita, Oak, and Almond in phase 2.
And I think there was also a question at a previous meeting that, well, just about, there are other things, I mean, leaving Gardner out of it, but like at Santa Rita, and I think Oak also, they have multi-purpose room needs or other needs as well, and so would it make sense to do those? Or is it even possible to do those at the same time? So that you're only on a campus once? So what if you just did Oak and Santa Rita, you modernized them and put in whatever building you need to put in? And then you move that third school to phase 3 with Gardner but I'm just asking, like, is it possible to just be on a campus one time?
Brian, do you want to say something?
Well, I can let them, so they should respond to that question, and then I would like to add a comment.
I think an answer is anything is possible. But it would certainly take the modernization of several schools off of this bond
Okay,
project
all right,
list,
so it
right?
would just move them
Yeah.
down because of the, all right, okay.
Correct.
So, can I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, because, so there are districts that sort of take that approach, right? So like Palo Alto just totally rebuilt Hoover.
Hoover, yeah.
Right, and so there are districts that do that, like they'll just rebuild this campus every 30 years, then they'll
Right.
rebuild this campus. I think, you know, as we've gone down this path, we've chosen not to take that approach, right?
Right.
And so we're trying to sort of do, but yeah, that's my impression is that. So the answer to, can we also do the multi is no, not if we're gonna modernize the schools, I think.
Okay, all right,
My other comment is that I think this is more sort of like thoughts and direction as opposed to changes or whatever, but you know, as we look at when you were sort of talking about the roofs being very thin, one of the concerns that I have is that in trying to sort of modernize every one of our permanent classrooms, that we will end up in sort of a budget crunch and end up with cheap materials again, you know, because we sort of have to, I'm a little worried that we're gonna actually stretch too thin. And sort of end up being penny wise and pound foolish and like having to redo all of this stuff again in 15 years. So I want to be, I don't know how we be conscious of that, but my sort of understanding is that a lot of these numbers, I mean, these are estimation numbers, right? So my impression is that they're sort of square footage based and, you know, we'll see what things actually cost. So I would hope that as we actually get into the, you know, as we hire the architect and get into the nitty gritty for each school, we just make sure that we're doing what we do well and not like trying to do everything in a, you know, and end up having to skimp on materials or cause ourselves more problems down the road.
well, yeah, and I mean, I know it's probably cost prohibitive, but like for roofing, is there a reason we wouldn't put on a 50-year metal roof?
Cost.
It's just, okay, all right, that's fine,
And
I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering.
Or I mean, does that roof? I mean. For any of these options, does it extend, do those things last longer than the lifetime of the current permanent structures? Like at some point, those structures need to just come down and be rebuilt, right?
Correct.
So,
You want to put $1 million roof on a building that's not worth that much, yeah. You know, if you want to do, one of the things we brought to the board, and we'll ask you to approve the final district standards at a future meeting. As we brought the draft standards, is we do believe in having district standards that we work with our maintenance staff and all of the team has a lot of experience. Is that we are going to get high quality materials that are proven and high performing. It's also high quality but high performing. Like you don't want to put a roof that's very expensive, but it doesn't perform well and it leaks or it's not a good material. So we're going to make sure that when we approve things, that it's high quality and high performing. You know, you want high performing flooring that's good, low VOCs that are good for indoor air quality, things like that. So there's a lot of things when we do our district standards that we're not going to go cheap. School construction is not cheap. So we're not going to spend money on high dollar, you know, union labor and contractors that are really good and then put in like really poor materials. So that's one of the reasons why we're having district standards is that we're going to put in what we believe is a high performing.
We want like a Toyota Camry, something
Yes.
that lasts for a long time. It's good resale value, like
Yeah,
it's good quality, but
Yeah.
it's not, you know, a Lamborghini.
yeah.
But we
Sure.
would want an electric. Because that would save us more money in the long
I
term.
don't know that we need to put metal roofs on current buildings, but like if you're building new classrooms. That you expect to last, that you expect that prefab building to last, like
50 years, yeah.
put on a roof that's gonna last so that you don't have to replace it afterwards. I don't know, anyway.
Yeah, a lot of the roofing materials, you know, it's based on the warranty, so the better, thicker roofing, you know, the thickness of the composition shingles gives you a longer warranty period. So we always want to go with a 30-year if we can.
Yeah.
And like to add to Brandon's comment was, yeah, you don't want to put on a, you know, this very expensive roofing material you're gonna tear the building down in another 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, do we know what year we need to tear the buildings down?
Well, it all depends. I mean, DSA has a threshold requirement. So DSA this is a new requirement where if you start spending so much money on modernizing, they want you to tear the whole building down. So we also, as we're doing our construction cost and estimating, we're going to be mindful of that. Most buildings can last 50 or 60 years. The good news is our buildings are good for seismic, right? And sometimes so much seismic work needs to be done to make it seismically retrofitted that you might as well just tear it down. Our buildings are in good shape in that form. So I think we would have to determine how like we have a couple of buildings at some of our schools. The buildings are in good condition, but you can see the building settling a little bit. So some flooring materials are cracked or the door is not like closing all the way. And so then you go, oh, that building's probably getting past its useful life. So then we would make a determination, hey, maybe it's more cost effective to tear the building down, which sometimes it is, versus doing that.
Still a good question.
Oh, well, I had a couple
Yeah,
of comments.
that's
So
a good question though.
your question, actually, Steve Talio asked like a very similar question of like Randy Kenyon and Lisa Gelfand, the architect that we used to hire, and she had indicated that she thought that the envelopes of the buildings were going to be good for a while and that it was much more critical to replace all these parts than it was to like do a full tear down. And that if once you have replaced all these components, that actually the buildings still have plenty of useful life left in them. And then I was also going to respond to like your question about, can we just touch one campus one time and then be done with it? But like as a homeowner, I know that you're never done. You're never done. Like things just keep breaking and needing to be replaced. So like the way I think of it is like, for this bond and this maybe 8 to 10 year period or however long it is, right? We try to touch each campus once perhaps, but then we will have to pass another bond.
Yeah.
And for that bond, maybe we can get to the multi-purpose rooms and then we'll have to touch each campus once again.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, the goal, your previous district is really a model Fremont Union High School District. Every 6 to 8 years, you're passing a bond, and many of our neighboring districts have done this. And for whatever reason, our district has not done this. Because you want to get in this cycle where we're constantly not just maintaining, but we're actually improving facilities. That's the goal.
And I think if you look at the master plan, that is part of the master plan goal is let's get rid of all the portables. Let's build some new buildings and really modernize our campuses. But the master plan is like our blueprint. And then it doesn't mean we can, and I think the master plan was $800 million of improvements, but we know we can't raise $800 million in one bond sale. So authorization. So that is that continual investment that we need to look into in the future.
And I mean, we've had presentations before on the sort of cash flow issue, right? So we're looking at implementation that's going to run from like now through 2034, right, of this bond money. And I want to be careful because like the last time all the campuses got renovated, right, was also a long process and they ran out of money, which is why we're dealing with a lot of these portables.
Yeah.
And so I would like us to make sure that we're being extra conservative about what we plan to do at the first couple of campuses so that the ones that come later don't end up getting, I mean, we have disparities in our district right now because this is what happened, that we did work at some schools that we then couldn't afford at the later schools. So I would much rather be conservative about project scope and then have, like, if everything goes well and like wars end and stuff stops, inflation reduces, then maybe we have enough money left over for when we get some money back from the state. Like maybe there's money left over to do phase 7 and do the Santa Rita multi, right? Without with the money here. But like I'd much rather be in that position than a position where we run out.
I mean, that may be not to combine the two Bullis projects into one phase as well, right?
Sorry, say that again.
Not running out of money could be to not combine the new construction of Bullis versus the modernization of Bullis. Gardner Bullis.
Right.
Because
okay.
then you're loading a bunch of money into one campus that might stop a different campus from getting any
it's another reason in my mind to move the new classroom. I mean, this is the trade-offs you have to make, but it's another reason to maybe move the new classrooms back. But it's definitely a reason not to do those as separate projects, right? Because now we're just spending whatever it costs to like
Well,
do the
Yeah.
site
I
work.
mean. Yeah,
But yeah.
sorry, I picked on the shade structure just
No,
because
no,
it's
no,
a sad.
I mean, I'm not,
Sad point in our history.
No, but I think that's the kind of thing that we're gonna have to look at.
Right.
That our architect is gonna
Yeah.
have to look at carefully at all of these sites, is like, once you get down to the nitty gritty of exactly what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna have to be flexible enough to adjust and say, you know, like, maybe there will be classrooms that we don't modernize, because if we touch that building, then it's gonna cost us an extra $3 million.
Right.
Whereas we can save that money and stretch everything a little farther.
Which is why today and this, you know, by the end of the school year, we're asking you only to kind of approve that phase 2, phase 1, phase 2. And we will learn more about the nitty gritty as we do and plan for phase 2 that will inform what happens beyond.
Okay, yeah, so I also have some comments on that. Yeah, so I agree with you, and I think that's something we should factor in further down when we have maybe 4 schools left. And we want to think very carefully about which we save for last, you know what I mean? Because those are the ones most at risk of not having sufficient funds. But the first 5 schools should hopefully be safe. And then I wanted to comment like on the glazing and that sort of thing. Like I also think about like how can we save general fund dollars, right? And utilities is in that category. But I'm hoping that with like the HVAC and the roofing replacement, that you know the windows aren't gonna, yeah, exactly, do so much harm. Because even though we are paying like 3 million a year in like utilities or whatever, you know, I'm guessing the windows cost like so much more that you know it's not worth it.
The only reason I brought that up is because when we remodeled our home recently, we could have done or not done the windows, but our single pane windows in the, you know, the winter when you're supposed to bring your plants inside, we moved our plants closer to the house because the heat that was
Coming out.
coming out of the house was enough to keep the plants warm through the freezes. But and that was the one thing that my husband and I said, like, no matter what we do, we're changing all the windows to these good insulated windows. So that's why it's, but you're right. I mean, if you put like a new roof and do all this other stuff, it might minimize the harm. Windows. So what direction is staff seeking today? I'm sorry.
Yep, so we are seeking direction because we want to bring back an action item before the end of the school year on the specifics of phase 2. And I heard Stella talk about a suggestion that phase 2 include Almond, Oak, and Santa Rita. If people have other thoughts beyond that.
When would phase 3 start? Whatever gets moved to phase 3, for example, when would that?
Based on cash flow, so our initial cash flow, we just did Series A in March. We would do Series B for $85-90 million in spring of 2028. And remember, our bond financing is an every other year issuance, so probably 2030. So the summer of 2030, we could probably do 1 or 2 projects. And then if we have enough cash, and then summer of 31, we do another, you know, we do another series in sell Series C in 2030. And we would, you know, there'll be work doing. The idea is that we're selling the bonds and spending it as fast as we can. But there's our constraints, right? The constraints are based on the AV. If the AV holds at least 4% per year, then we should be on our tax rate to be able to issue the bonds when we expect to.
So phase 2 would be spring of 2028.
Phase 2 would be summer of 29. And then phase 3 would be summer of 30 and possibly 31.
We're pretty much on like a 3-year cycle from making a decision to then planning, DSA approval, doing the work.
Correct.
And so a year from now, we'll be talking about phase 3,
Correct.
which tees us up for a 3-year process to get that work done.
And then I think if you look at your cash flow sheet, I think it might be helpful because Because, the cash flow is tied to. the program. So, for example, right now, we will want to get into planning. So when you're doing a project, at the beginning of the project, the lowest cost is just getting started and hiring the architects. So if you look at, it says phase one. We would, this summer, it says 26-27 programming. We will do programming this summer, and then by the end of the year, January, February, we'll get any things that we need that might need DSA approval. We'll get them into DSA. And then in the summer of 27-28, we'd be bidding things out. We will be doing the work in the summer of 27-28 because that's the summer that we're doing middle school. And any things that need to happen are all happening in that summer. If you look at phase two, I've got us pretty much 15 months of design. Then we get into DSA at this time next year, and that's 9 to 12 months of DSA. Then we get into construction in the summer of 28-29, and that's kind of, and then the cash, if you look at the cash flow is part of where we're at in the project. So if you look at phase one, not a lot of money is going out at the beginning because we're just in the design phase. But as we get into construction, that's where your costs start coming in. All your construction costs, inspection costs, all of those costs start coming in at that time. So it's just like our multi-year projections for our general fund and cash flow. It's the same thing, but it's how much revenue we have. And then you can see at the very bottom, the very, very bottom, is at the beginning of the year of this fiscal year that we're in now, we had $40 million. And then we have spent $1 million per, you can see the quarterly expenditures. And then the last quarter, now that we're starting demolition, we're gonna have a big expense between now and the end of June. And then you can see the negative numbers coming in. And then you can see in quarter three of 27-28, we're gonna sell $85 to $90 million. And then that when our cash gets low, to like in the 20s, it might be, and it could be more, it could be less, it's just a projection. And then we'll sell another series of bonds. And that's kind of what we have to do is you're in this normal rhythm of one project's in design, one's in construction, or one's in design, one's in DSA, one's in construction. Well, you've got one in construction, the other one is getting DSA approval, and it's getting teed up and ready for the next summer or the next open time that you've had it. So it's really the bond program is you're constantly in design, DSA, or construction. And once you're done with construction, you're getting the next project closed out. You're getting that project closed out, and once we do one summer, then we're getting ready for the next summer. And it's going to be, it'll happen very quick. But the DSA and the planning is what takes the longest. So to have a successful summer project, it's all the planning ahead of time that makes it happen.
So if we were to push the new classrooms at Gardner Bolus to phase three, which would be summer of 2030, like they even manage with what they have now for 4 more years?
Sure.
Yeah, that's, okay.
Right, everyone manages.
I don't
We manage.
So right now we have 9 campuses all getting more or less equivalent modernizing upgrade. And then we have Gardner Bullis getting the additional upgrade of new classrooms. It seems to me that we would not want an outcome if we run out of money late in the process and 7 schools get the modernizing upgrades, but Gardner Bullis gets those upgrades plus the new classrooms, right? Getting best of everything, but 2 schools get nothing, right? So it, I mean, to me, it feels like maybe a better way to sort of break that up would be to keep the 2 Gardner Bullis projects separate, front load whichever one we think is more important, and then subordinate the other one until phase, whatever the last phase is.
Okay. experience what happened in the last bond, right? Like, what by the time we ran out of money, I think Almond was the last one that got a brand new permanent multi. And other schools did not, as we found out. And I know that that caused a little bit of friction between the schools.
You just have to be, always be mindful of the mission and what is our master plan, what are our needs and priorities, and try to look and try to stay in that. Have those blinders on, because sometimes you get this thing called scope creep. Oh, since we're modernizing, let's add this, and then the project becomes out of budget. So we want to be mindful of that. There will be any time we bring things to the board, any budget changes, budget revisions. If the project is over budget, we're going to ask you to increase the budget for it. If the project it finishes with money left, then money's gonna go back to the program. And then that money can be reallocated for other projects and other things later on. That's the good part of it, is there's gonna be a ton of times that where the board can make decisions, and because we are gonna bring contracts to you, budget proposals. And we're gonna make sure that you have as much information as you need to make good decisions, and we'll be very transparent. We've been very transparent with our whole process with the facility master plan with a lot of input, and we want to continue doing that.
And our goal also is to go out for another bond before this bond runs out, right? That,
Yeah,
and that we have projects to show for the first
Yes.
phases of the bond, right? To show the community.
Right, so I think even if there were two schools that did, had less of this round of bond funding applied to it, I think that we would still get to those schools and get to those projects, but it might be at a later date after the second or after another bond has passed.
Well, wasn't there? I don't know, there's another plan that had like 6 phases.
Yeah,
or-
big one.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we put
And-
again a block at the end for
and
that.
like Egan and Block are the 2 schools that were at the very end.
for their modernization.
Right.
Right,
That's
but
correct.
we're not asking you to prioritize
No,
that because
yeah, right.
we figured too many things can change over the next 10 years, right? There might be a problem at Egan that just needs to be addressed and it has to become phase 3.
Right.
Yeah, and we also, and we need to be mindful of if our number one priority is get something done in the summer of 29, we have to start, that's our critical path. Our critical path is to get architects on board, get our scope, what's the scope we're gonna do at what sites, and get that process started. And then we can come back at another time and say, okay, now that we've got phase 2 started, what will be phase 3? So when we look at the master plan, and Sandra made a great example, something might come up that we have to say, we can't do that school this summer. This one has major infrastructure needs or something happens. It's a flexible master plan. The bond program is, it's allowed, you're allowed, it's not just set in stone. The first phase, once we get the first phase started, but we do have to get started, for sure.
Yeah, I just wanna, since you weren't on the board at the time, like when we were having the discussions about what sort of pull in and pull out, like we pulled the new classrooms at Gardner Bullis kind of up into this Measure EE scope, because if we didn't do that, then there was looking like sort of the Gardner Bullis students would be, students at Gardner Bullis would be the only ones sort of across the elementary schools who weren't in a permanent classroom for their regular classroom, right? Because with moving 6th grade and enrollment shrinkage, like we basically already have enough permanent buildings everywhere else that the main classroom where the students spend most of their time will be a permanent classroom everywhere except for Gardner Bullis because of just the history, right? And so pulling that in, I think makes sense, because Measure EE, if we can't pass another bond, like at the end of Measure EE, every student will be spending vast majority of their time in a modernized permanent classroom. And like we have enough money to get that, we do all the, I'm a little bit more optimistic that we won't run into the sort of we ran out of money problem with this phase, because the last bond, even though it had problems, like we were stick building 9 different campuses. And so like part of the reason they ran out of money was the cost of steel doubled right after they decided to, build Egan out of steel. And so like those, once we do the first couple, the work, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but like at that point, the modernization work at the other schools is like the same work that we're doing at Santa Rita for the most part, right? With the district standards, it should be like the same HVAC units, the same, all the rest of this stuff. So we should have a much better idea of what it's gonna cost to do the other schools. So I'm cautiously optimistic as long as we, manage the remaining risks. I also, just sorry, before I forget it, I just wanted to say that Santa Rita, Oak and Almond make a lot of sense to me as the first three, because Santa Rita and Almond are our two schools with the highest proportion of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, right? So, and then Oak is the third, makes sense because it was sort of the most impacted by the we ran out of money problem the last time around, outside of Santa Rita and Almond. So like, to me, those make a lot of sense. It's like, here's why we're doing these three first, and then.
Well, and if Gardner moves potentially into phase 3, that's 2 years earlier than the original plan, so. Just trying not to
I
get
love the options.
shot on my way.
My point is only that there's been talk about whether it makes sense to combine two
Right.
parts of Gardner Bullis. No one's put any numbers next to why that's a benefit. So if it is a benefit cost wise, then
Yeah.
okay, we can take
Right.
that
We
into
can
account,
look at
but
that, yeah.
but unless that's a meaningful benefit.
Right.
Doesn't seem any reason why we should think about why that should factor into the.
I do agree with you that we should probably decouple the two Gardner projects.
When we get to talking about phase 3, those are some options that we will bring to you.
Yeah,
Well.
But I guess, why that's important is that maybe keeps the one Gardner project in phase 2 versus.
Right,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, right, but I think. Just from previous Gardner projects, there's a lot that can go wrong with that. That I think if we're modernizing schools. Yeah, then. That's what we're doing, and there's less that can go wrong.
I mean, I don't. Have students at Gardner, so I don't know this intimately. I was there yesterday, so I saw this like in person, but
Yeah.
My view of it is that the need for new classrooms exceeds the need for modernization there. But I mean, I'm also not an expert.
I'm gonna go to Stella, and then I'd like to kind of go straw poll to see how people feel about this.
Well, like what I'm hearing from Jim is that he's concerned that if we were to build the new classrooms, it would trigger all these DSA compliance issues and they'd be forced to modernize anyway. You know what I mean? But like not having planned for it, so that like because they're gonna have to inspect the new construction and then they're gonna be like, well, you're in violation of all these things. Now you gotta fix all these things, and like we didn't budget for it in phase 2, and then now we're like in trouble or whatever. And I imagine there must be efficiencies from like just doing both types of construction at the same time, because you only have to pay once for like the fencing and the porta potties and all that construction setup versus doing it twice. That's what I imagine.
I mean, I would rather have a better understanding of what our risks are of. I have post-traumatic stress from.
Clearly,
projects. Yeah. So, like, they need new classrooms, but I am concerned that all of a sudden, I mean. We lived through this, like, oh yeah, now you gotta do this, now you gotta do this, now you gotta do this. And.
Also, keep in mind, Gardner's like 5 years newer than, I think, the next oldest class, right?
Yeah.
It was only done in the mid-2000s, I can't remember exactly when, but it was
But like-
2006.
only half the school,
Yeah,
but.
only half the school.
But it also seems like it's, and this is the thing, is that like the modernization of the rest of it seems like it probably a little, or intuitively would be a little less of a priority because it's 5 years newer. Maybe that's wrong, but yeah, anyway, I think we're all saying the same thing, so a few on.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is, or one proposal on the floor, is to go with option 2, classroom modernization of Santa Rita, Oak and Almond. And how do people feel about that in terms of giving direction to?
We've already spoken.
We've spoken about it. You guys, what do you think?
I mean, I'm okay with it. I mean, my concern with option 1 is we just don't know what's gonna happen. If we had a better understanding of that, I might make a better choice, a different choice, but.
I mean, I would also prioritize new classrooms at Gardner Bullis, but I completely understand your point about it triggering a whole cascade of other costs and issues that we have not planned for. How do you feel about option two with almond instead of?
I'm okay with either version of option two. I think I slightly favor option one over option two, for
Right.
all those reasons, but and I mean, but if there's a compelling reason to do option two over option one, then we'd get on board with that as well.
I think I'm kind of like in your boat, but yeah, I am worried about the cost of stuff that we haven't planned for, and you're being very judicious, Eric, about planning for all the contingencies, and I don't want something to derail us.
And I just want to be mindful, just like we have reserves in our general fund, we have project contingency, we have design and construction contingency to cover things. When you're doing new construction, it's a lot easier, because the only thing you don't know is what's in the ground, right? Because everything else is new. And so there's no like unforeseen conditions in the new building, it's all brand new design. But when we're doing modernization of something that hasn't been touched in a long time, when you peel the wall back or the roof back, there's what's called unforeseen or unknown conditions where you don't know. So when we get our construction team on board, they're gonna do some pre-construction surveys, and they come out early and try to uncover these unknowns. And that's how you kind of try to mitigate your risk. You don't want to start a roofing project without taking a little peek and like looking in the attic. And, they do core samples. You can take a core of the roof to see what's going on underneath it. And so there's a lot of work that is done in pre-construction that hopefully uncovers some of these things. But, so when you're doing modernization, you usually carry a bigger contingency for design and construction issues, because it's a lot of unknown things, because it's an existing building and we might not know the original drawings. Can we find these things? And so we don't know. So when you're, so we want to be conservative and we also have a project contingency, because of the architects might cost more, the inspectors might cost more. So there's a lot of contingencies built in to cover some of these things, to hopefully mitigate some of the risks that there's some concerns about. And again, once it comes to bid time and we get the final numbers, and then we say, okay, that's the number. Right? We will have a thing called the guaranteed maximum price, and that's the maximum price. There'll be some allowances and contingencies, and if they're not used, then the district gets those back. Just like in the San Antonio campus, we're holding, if you see on this top sheet, there's $6.8 million in design and construction contingency. If we don't use that, that money comes back to the district as a deductive change order, and then that project cost, instead of $127 million, the total budget is gonna go down by 6.8 million. So if something comes up during construction at the San Antonio campus, we would take it from that design and construction contingency first. If it goes past that, then the far right column, we've got project contingency, and that's for their overall. And if we go past all that, now we gotta pull from the program contingency to cover those costs. And we would bring that back to the board to ask you, hey, there, something happened out there, and we've got to increase the budget for this project. But we're hoping that doesn't happen. But those are the type of things to help protect the bond program. You've got to have some, but you don't want to have it all in contingency, and then you're leaving money stuck in contingency that you can't allocate towards projects, right? So there has to be some movement, and there will be, as we finish a project. If there's money that we budgeted that doesn't get used, the board can allocate that to another project and maybe expand the scope of adding classrooms or doing whatever we need to do. So there's some flexibility, but we do want to get some direction, so thank you.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the direction to staff is to go forward with option two, classroom modernization of Santa Rita Oakland Almond. In phase two, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Sandra, Eric, on this one. Should I adjourn? Sure. There we go.
I mean, I guess my lingering question is, so you brought up a lot of concerns about doing the new construction at Gardner separately, right?
Would be.
And I guess my question for Eric is, are you as concerned that it could far exceed what's here, because I hear that we're almost like split in what the
Right.
priority is.
Well, and after you just were talking about those contingencies, I mean, I'm kind of like, okay, if you feel like we're not gonna go off the rails on new construction, then I can get behind that, but like, I'm seeing barely
Almost
$1
$1
million in contingencies and $80,000 shade structure cost us almost $500,000. So that's why I'm worried, but if you feel like, I mean, yeah, I might say option one is the better choice, but
Well,
that's where I'm concerned.
I mean,
I
the other,
just
the
think
other thing that
there's,
makes me uncomfortable, so there's a number of things that make me uncomfortable with putting the Garter-Bolts classrooms in option one, but one of them that I think you alluded to was that we haven't started sort of planning any of these modernizations in detail, right? And so I'm a little uncomfortable moving forward with trying to do the new classrooms before we even completely understand the modernization projects at our existing campuses.
Sure.
Because once we do once we do the first modernization projects, then I think we'll have a much better handle on like what the unintended consequences of adding the new classrooms at Gardner Bullis could be. Like you talk about, like the alarm system, fire alarm systems are a large line item in these estimates. And it sounds like if we do the new classrooms at Gardner Bullis, we'd basically have to do the fire alarm modernizations in the rest of the campus so that we just have one system. And at that point, like, okay, well, if we're doing the fire alarm modernizations, like now we've got electricians in the attic, like, should we do, like, I sort of feel like if we move forward trying to do the new Gardner Bullis classrooms in phase two, we're gonna end up doing all of Gardner Bullis, and then we are out of money for phase two. So it just doesn't make sense to me, both from an optics standpoint and from a risk standpoint. Like, I just can't get behind it.
And we're really talking about possibly only a 1 year difference in start time, right? Like
yes.
28
29 to
versus
30.
29 or 29 to 30.
Yeah. Right, and potentially it moves it up from 32 when it was a possibility on the, anyway, yeah.
And I think there is interest, like, kind of amongst all five of us to see it done earlier rather
Right.
than like at the tail end.
Yes,
Phase three is like right in the middle.
right.
I mean, we want to be thoughtful in planning, but also it's in our best interest to spend the money as quickly as we can. Still have to stay under the tax rate, so that's why we can't issue it all at the same time. But we want to be getting this normal rhythm that we're doing construction all the time, and then that gets as we're spending the dollars as we have them, and that helps stop. I mean, escalation is going to happen no matter what, and so just Bay Area alone is 5% per year. And if there's other factors triggering, global wars and things like that are triggering, gasoline, all these workers drive cars to our site. So I just want to be mindful of, we are going to try to be as thoughtful as we can, but also there's a sense of urgency to go as quickly as possible, but not go so quick that we're missing things.
Yeah.
But there's a sense of urgency to get the bond program going.
The only other comment that I would have, nobody smacked me. I'm fine with option two, right, with Oak School,
Almond.
Santa Rita
Yeah.
and Almond. But I do think, and this could just be my perspective, but I do think that it sounds like we're taking a different and more thoughtful approach to just general maintenance and modernization and bond programs in general. And so it would be good if we can come up with a way to communicate that publicly so that people do feel like they understand. I mean, it does feel a little bit like a change. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but it does feel like a little bit of a change. And I think some education for the community somehow through communication might be beneficial as we work through this.
Can I clarify the change?
Oh, just, like you were, I mean, we were talking about how we wanna be in like this 3-year process, like,
Yes.
you know, constantly be working on
Yeah.
things. And then you had mentioned specifically that at Fremont Union, like, they planned to go out every year, and again, this could just be my perspective, but I feel like in our community, people don't feel like previously there were plans at all, and if there weren't necessarily thoughtful plans. They were more reactionary. And so
Gotcha.
I feel like this is a little bit of a,
Storytelling.
yeah,
Like a press release or something.
I don't know.
No.
I don't know what the answer to that is, but I mean, like, we've heard from the public and they have some concerns and confusion and I think it would just help us.
Yeah, well, I like storytelling opportunity,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think, I've talked to Sandra about this, like. People are always gonna be confused
Sure.
because, it's a lot to keep track of when people come in but. If we can get the story up on the web, just
Yeah.
like a 3-paragraph narrative on the website, I think would go a long way to sort of like.
Well, and
Here's the
just-
plan. Here's where we
yeah.
are.
Well, I mean, I take your point because, a few years ago when MBLA went out for a bond, not the one week, but the one before that, the whole community that I spoke, they all were so in favor of it because, MBLA, they've got a plan, they know how to get this, and they were quite negative about LASD and us going out for a bond. And I
Right.
think to your point, I mean, I know what the public perception is, and then I think that with the storytelling opportunity, we can show that we are being very thoughtful and planning for like contingencies and things. It'll make it easier to go out for the bond that comes after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we know there has to be another, I mean, we
Exactly.
knew when we passed this bond that there were,
Well, it's not just us, there always have to be bonds.
Right,
It's
there
the only
always
way to
have-
pay for school facilities.
it's the only way to do it, yeah.
And we are gonna apply for state funding for some modernization and new construction. But you have to put your application in and you have to wait. And so if some of those funds come in the next 4 to 5 years, those funds can go into our bond program and that can fund another project. So that's another source of revenue. But like Brian said, there really is no other source of revenue for capital improvements other than either state bonds, which is very limited, and then our normal general obligation bonds that we pass on loans.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was very helpful.
This was a good conversation. Honest. So I'm gonna adjourn our meeting. Thank you.